Aloha, it's Dave Lawrence. How are you? I hope you're doing good. Thank you for tuning in and catching this. Today we've got a very special guest joining us. He's going to be performing at the Hawaii Theater on June 4th on a bill that includes Hawaii's own Hot Club of Hula'ville, and he calls in advance to talk about that. And my guest is coming with his quintet, which we're going to hear about. Plus, he's got a colorful background. He's played for a number of major celebrities, including Elton John. Make that Sir Elton John. And for years he played with him. He also had the opportunity to work with Bonnie Raitt and Luciano Pavarotti and Billy Joel, Bob Dylan, Sting, to name some major artists I see associated with him and that he's collaborated with. It's a pleasure to welcome and have a conversation with the talented multi-instrumentalist John Jorgenson. Aloha and mahalo, Brother John.
Aloha. Thanks so much, Dave.
And I appreciate it. It's really nice of you to take just a couple minutes for me before you hit the islands. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. No problem. We're really looking forward to it. I haven't been there to play with my quintet ever, so this will be our first time over to Hawaii, and so all the guys are really looking forward to it, and we just think, and the theater, I've seen the website, the theater is just beautiful.
The place you're playing is just one of the, we're fortunate here in the islands to have a few nice venues here in Honolulu, and that certainly is one of them. Now, have you been here to play ever before or into the islands? What's your history with the islands?
Yeah, I must have been, I was still in college, and my father was a conductor of, he was a music professor at the college that I went to school, University of Redlands in Southern California. And he brought his, what he called his studio band, which was kind of like a jazz big band, over to play. And it must have been 1976, maybe 77.
Wow! So you haven't been back since then?
No.
Oh, this is huge.
So, and I was so young then too. You know, I was at college age, and we didn't really get to see all that much because we didn't have a vehicle, and we were kind of with the school. So. And
that was here in Honolulu. You were on Oahu.
Pardon?
You were just here in Honolulu on this island, Oahu.
Yeah, yep. We are, and we got to see a little bit of the island, but really not that much. So this time, we're really looking forward to being there, and also we're going to play over in Maui as well on the day following, on the 5th, following the concert in Honolulu.
Okay, so there's a second, and where is the second gig at?
It's at the
Mac Castle Theater, something like that?
Yeah, exactly. The McCoy Theater is
McCoy Studio Theater.
The Mac, yeah.
Yeah, okay, the McCoy Studio Theater. Okay, I'll cut another intro. I'll make sure to get that in there. I was unaware. Sometimes, and that's one of the weird things about the islands, too, and it's great that we're talking because a lot of shows come to different islands, and sometimes the word just doesn't even get out there. Well,
I think what happened is somebody heard about this show coming up and said, gosh, if they're going to be all the way over here, maybe we could get them over to Maui, too, and of course, we would love to see as much as possible, so fantastic, Yeah, no, that's a good thing. So that's going to be the 4th here, the 5th on Maui. Yep.
And then the fans who are going to be going, when they come to the shows that you're going to be doing, the second annual Django Would Go Music Festival is the Honolulu portion. What are fans attending? Are they both going to basically, first of all, are both of your days here going to be essentially the same show, or are they going to be different in any way?
The shows are always different because I kind of judge what we're going to play by the audience reaction and kind of by the vibe. They'll be definitely similar because, we have a particular repertoire and the songs that we play, of course, they're definitely, our whole style is influenced by Django Reinhardt and his French swing, but we have a lot of other kind of international elements, a lot of Eastern European gypsy music, Latin, flamenco, classical, even funk. There's a lot of world music influences. I play the bouzouki, which is a Greek instrument, as well as the guitar and also the clarinet, and sing a little bit. And so it's really, most people when they say world music, they think of mostly like reggae or African music, but I consider this world music just because the elements come from so many different places around the world. So that's what our audiences will be hearing.
And the show that's here on Oahu, the second annual Django Would Go Music Festival show, is that going to be, are you going to try to do things more in the spirit that maybe Django would have done them?
Well, we do that, definitely. We always include that element.
Good.
Because really that's sort of, he's the godfather of our style. So definitely we always include some classic Django-style swing.
That'll be happening. And we'll talk a little... Say again?
Sorry? Well, Django was very influenced by American swing. So we'll play some of that as well, you know, the New Orleans style swing that really turned him on. So yeah, it gets across a really broad area stylistically. And
we'll come back to Django because I have another angle on that I'm curious about. Besides the electric thing that you also do, besides it being electric, what are the differences between the band that you're bringing here to the islands and the electric stuff that I see online that you're doing overseas?
Well, it's a completely different lineup of people, different style of music, different type of guitars. In the electric band, it's more rock, I guess, more in the rock world. It's not really jazz or swing, and it's again, it's kind of, there's a lot of white influences in the electric band, but it's definitely my electric guitar style is just a whole different thing than the acoustic guitar style. And, you know, in that, I would play like a Telecaster or a Stratocaster through a Vox AC30, and it's pretty aggressive. There's still a fair amount of technique, but there's just two completely different groups of repertoire, really.
And that's kind of the cool thing about talking to you and about the fact that you're going to be coming here, because you really have this this eclectic background, both in the experience that you have, but also in what you're currently doing today. And I like that. You know, when I was taking a look at it. In fact, part of our interview, I'm going to speak with Albert Lee, who I know I see that you have gigs with this year. What's your take on him as a guitar player, and on, you know, what those shows might be like for folks?
Well, Albert has been one of my favorite players since I first saw him in probably '76 with Emmylou Harris. He was such a great player, and pretty much I think he's influenced every country guitar player since then, really. He's probably the most influential in country guitar playing today. And I just think he's a brilliant... He has a particular rhythm in the way that he plays. I don't mean rhythm guitar, but in the cadence that he plays, the way he plays lines and notes, that's so distinctive. You can just tell him right off the bat. And sometimes it's not easy because so many people try to imitate him. But still, his style is so cool. And he has some similar influences that I did on the guitar. Jimmy Bryant was one. And I know he also liked Jesse McReynolds, who was a mandolin player, who I also was heavily influenced by him. So, you know, we have some similar influences, but also he's British. You know, for a British guy to play such great American country guitar is unusual. And so I've been a fan for a long time, and we've known each other for quite a while, and had never really done anything together musically. You know, even though I'd done things with Emmylou Harris and he had done, and, you know, we'd played a lot with a lot of the same people over the years, but never at the same time. So when we both won a Grammy Award as part of this project that Brad Paisley put together, I thought, hey, we should just, you know, why don't we get together and do some shows? And that was a year ago, 2 years ago, we won the award. And last year I wanted to do some shows together, and it just didn't work out schedule-wise. But this year it is working out, so we're going to do 2 batches of shows, a little tour of the West Coast of the U.S. and a little tour of the East Coast of the U.S. in July and August. So very much looking forward to that.
It's gigantic, and I'm stoked. It'll be a nice a nice piece to throw some to have a conversation with him as part of this. I'm sure it'll make people go, it'll entice people to check out your show even more. When you think of your life, what was the first? Because you have a really amazing resume. What was the first big name that you got to work with, John?
I would say, well, I did a couple things when I was pretty young with some pretty big names. I mean, I played with Benny Goodman when I was a teenager, and also Louis Bellson. But I wouldn't really say I was working with them. You know what I mean? I played in an orchestra accompanying them. But probably the first really big name that I toured with, I would say, would have been Dan Fogelberg.
How'd you get the gig?
Well, actually, I'm wrong. I'd have to say Chris Hillman probably was then before that, and David Griffin was before that. Well, I met David Grisman at a musical instrument trade show, and we started jamming together. And while we were jamming, Chris Hillman came and saw me playing, and he invited me to start playing with him in an acoustic band. And then that band got asked to back up and open for Dan Fogelberg. And eventually it kind of morphed into the Desert Rose Band.
I see the progression.
But strangely enough, even before I met Chris, I had met Albert and played with him, and Sneaky Pete Kleinow and played with him. So everything does kind of hook up in a strange way,
Yeah, no, I know how that. I know the that's why I like these kind of things. I like seeing the lineage as things progress. And how did you get the Elton John gig, and how different was that gig from the things you had done previously?
Well, I got it because Chris Hillman's wife, Connie, had worked with Elton's management company for many years. And so Elton's a total music junkie, and he knows everything about everybody's career. And so he knew about Chris and heard the Desert Rose Band's first album and really liked it. So we were doing a gig to promote our second album, the release of it, in Hollywood at the Roxy, and Lyle Lovett was our opening act. And in the audience was Nicolette Larson, Dave Edmunds, Bruce Hornsby, Stills, Bernie Taupin, and Elton John, among, and my parents. Elton saw me at that show, and I must have stayed in his mind because I met him after the show, and he was very complimentary. And then every time I saw him, I'd see his shows a few times, and he always remembered my name and asked me what I was doing, And I became friends with his guitar player, Davy Johnston. And I figured that sometime I would do some recording with him or something, But then I kind of lost touch, and, life kind of went on, and I completely forgot about it. And it wasn't until 6 years later that he called me and asked me to go on tour with him. So you just never know. I really didn't, I wouldn't say like I was friends with him, we had met a few times, but, I literally had completely forgotten about it.
And did it become after the gig, now that you don't work with him currently, are you still tight with him? How much interaction do you still have?
I wouldn't say tight, because he's just so busy, with his life. But there's been already 2 or 3 times where he needed me for a particular, project musically, or to fill in for something else, since I stopped working for him full time. So it's basically kind of like if he needs me for a project, he'll call.
That's super cool. He's got some great people. I got to spend time with Ray Cooper once, and he's such a brilliant guy, and it's just cool to hear those stories. I see Bob Dylan mentioned on your Wikipedia page. What's the connection to Bob?
Well, that is because in the 90s, late 80s or early 90s, I did some recording and some live shows with the Byrds, with the original Byrds, David Crosby, Roger McGuinn, and Chris Hillman. And one of the shows that we did was a Roy Orbison kind of tribute concert after Roy Orbison passed away. And I was lucky enough to have gotten to play with Roy Orbison as well. But on that concert, I kind of heard a little rumor that maybe Bob Dylan was going to be sitting in with us. And sure enough, he did. Of course, I'd seen that photograph on the back of the Byrds' Mr. Tambourine Man album of Dylan sitting in with the Byrds at the Whiskey in 1965, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I just had that. I had that vision in my head, and I was like, I can't believe I'm here on stage with the Byrds and Bob Dylan.
I get excited just hearing you talk about it.
It was kind of, unbelievable. I mean, there's been so many of those moments that I just kind of went, really?
Like what? Tell me another one.
Oh, like when I was first recording with Elton, I think the first song that we recorded together, the producer was named Chris Thomas, and Chris was the one who kind of replaced George Martin working with the Beatles when George Martin got fed up. So that was Chris Thomas worked with the Beatles on the White Album. You know, he mixed Dark Side of the Moon. He produced the Pretenders, In Excess, Pete Townsend, David Bowie, the Sex Pistols, on and on and on. Just incredible career. Well, he was the producer, and we were working in Shepherd's Bush, which is where The Who is from.
Right.
Huge fan of The Who. Sting and the Pretenders were in the other studios within the building. So I'm in the break room, and I was playing a Burns guitar, which is an English electric 12-string guitar that had been given to me, and I was playing it through a matchless John Jorgensen signature model amp that had been designed and built for me. And so all of those things together were just like kind of overwhelming. Doing a session with Elton John, with a producer that worked with the Beatles, in a studio where The Who is from, next door to Pretenders and Sting, and playing these instruments that were designed and presented to me, and it just, it was just like, wow, okay, take stock. And another moment was, the Bonnie Raitt album, Nick of Time.
Right.
The one that really changed her career. Well, I had worked with Don Was, who produced that record, when he was working with Roy Orbison and Katie Lang. And I did a couple of television shows with them. And I read somewhere, like one of a scoop column or something, that he was going to be producing Bonnie Raitt. And I thought, wow, that's cool. I really like her. I would love to play on that record. And then, again, I just forgot about it. And about, a few months later, I got a call. I was on the road, staying in a kind of a bad hotel somewhere. I was on the road with Desert Rose Band, and we weren't all that well known yet, so we were staying in kind of crummy places, and the hotel phone rings, and here it's Don Was. And I was so surprised that he found me. This was in the days really before cell phones.
Tracked you down.
And he says, I said, Don, he says, I don't know if you remember me. And I said, of course I do. I've been hearing Was Not Was, Everybody Walk the Dinosaur on the radio all the time. Congratulations, it's a hit. And I said, and plus, I read somewhere that you were producing an artist that I really liked. I can't remember who it was right now, but he said, well, that's what I'm calling you about. The artist is Bonnie Raitt, and I'd like you to play on the record.
Amazing.
So it was like, again, a little bit crazy. And I remember doing the session thinking, wow, this, they had a particular line they wanted me to play on the guitar, and I played it. And I said, Bonnie, this would sound so good on the slide. Why wouldn't you play this on the slide? And she says, believe me, we have plenty of slide on this record already. I don't want any more, And then to get to go to the Grammy Awards that year and watch her win, I don't remember how many, 7 or something, Grammys for that album. Yeah, it was really exciting.
They're great. They're great stories, and one of the things in there that I like, and it's a great way to bring us back to my final question that I sort of held out here on us. And you mentioned a couple of things in there that are great lead-in, especially getting to be in Shepherd's Bush, home base of the Who. I love the Who too. I got to interview Pete on the phone. I've interviewed Roger in person and on the phone, and they mean a lot to me. But I also like some other heavier bands, and one of those bands that are kind of like the Who. Their guitar player was very influenced by Django Reinhardt, and it leads me to a question before I say who that is. I'm just curious, as a really diverse guitarist, and you've showed it through the things you have talked about in this conversation, who is the heaviest guitarist that you personally like, John?
The heaviest? Wow. Well, God, that's hard because...
You can put a couple. You don't have to go. We don't have to be singular, right? We can be plural.
I mean, as far as like a badass electric guitar player, Jeff Beck just always knocks me out. He always does something really unusual and amazing. But I don't know if I would consider him heavy.
Me either.
Much.
I can say the name of the guy. I'm curious. I mean, you haven't said it, so I don't know that he even means anything to you. But Tony Iommi from Black Sabbath, he was the guy.
I was thinking you might say Tony, and that was they're like obviously the prototypical heavy band, definitely. And I've never met him, but I did a gig not too long ago with. Let me think of everybody, with Rudy Sarzo and Carlos Cavazo and Vinny Appice.
Oh, Vinny's the man. I know Vinny and Carmine well.
Chaz West.
From Bonham.
Yep. And the keyboard player worked with, I can't remember his name right now, but he worked with Ozzy and Dio.
Not Claude Schnell or whatever.
No.
Don Airey?
Pardon?
Don Airey?
No. Shoot, I'm embarrassed.
Damn, you know Vinny? Do you actually know Vinny?
That's the only time we played together, but
okay.
The two songs that we played were The Mob Rules and an Immigrant Song.
Nice.
So it was really fun, because the idea was pick a Sabbath song and a Zeppelin song. And the thing, of course, about Tony Iommi, the thing about him that's
the fingers.
Django is the fingers, obviously. Yeah.
Man.
And the kind of the way I look at both of those guys is like that music was in them, and it was going to come out, regardless of what happened to their hands.
Yep.
And they both figured out a way how to do it, and it's
innovatively too.
Exactly.
They're real. I interviewed Iommi a bunch of times, always in person, and I don't have video of it this one particular time. But in '99 on the reunion tour, I was sitting with him in this trailer after the show, and I had the good sense to bring up the hands, and so he told me that, he's told the story a gazillion times, but I got the story told to me while sitting there looking at them, talking about the fingers.
Wow,
oh, dude.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Funny, just like as a guitar geek that I am, last year in Nashville we had a huge flood. I don't know if you heard about it, but
of course, yeah.
So many people's instruments and equipment were underwater for days, and no one could get to them, including mine, and Brad Paisley's and Peter Frampton's and Steve Earle's and on and on and on. But one of my, and I've spent a lot of time with my guitars, resurrecting the ones that I could, and doing repairs that I could do, and then having repairs done that I couldn't do. But for that benefit gig, I really wanted to get my white SG Custom running. It's a 1964 that I got from Alan Holsworth. And I wanted to play that guitar actually kind of in homage, because it's very, very similar to
Tony's.
Tony would play, yeah.
No doubt. Dude, you rock. You got a lot of stuff that you're into. Obviously, I'm very, very impressed. And I high-five you.
Oh, thank you so much. I thought you were going to maybe say Humble Pie.
Well,
Frampton was hugely influenced by Django, too. His dad was a big Django fan and used to play him Django's records when he was a kid.
And he's a very underappreciated guitarist, too. I think highly of Peter, so that's...
Yeah, I was a big fan of his even, before he was the solo artist. I was a fan of Humble Pie.
Well, maybe when you're in town, maybe I can stop by the gig and record a short interview or something with you.
Oh, that'd be great. Sure.
Just something like a follow-up, but because I really did dig talking to you, and I'll get something on the air. I'll mix in some Albert, and I hope you enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun.
Oh, I appreciate it. Yeah, you can go in a lot of places too, which is really cool. Because often people can't. You know what I mean?
Well, that's very kind of you, dude.
Aloha. This is John Jorgensen. You are tuned to the only show that matters with my friend Dave Lawrence. And it's time to synchronize our watches. Hey, Brother Dave, it's exactly 4:20.